father and founding mother. It started PCS back in 2009.
You said she and Gail, you meant she and this.
Sorry. Public speaking, guys.
You're doing great.
Gail and Dave back in 2009. Started PCS. So, and Gail has a real big heart for environmental justice too. And this is, even though she's retired from PCS, it's still really important. So I'm grateful that you're here too.
Thank you.
Okay. You go now?
Great.
Okay.
So the way we're going to do it tonight is I'm going to give a few opening comments about environmental justice, sort of just in general, to lay some groundwork. And then I'll have the panel introduce themselves so you know who's here. And we're going to have some questions to have them think about how does environmental justice rear its head in the Grand Rapids, West Michigan community? Where do we see examples of it? How is it playing out? And we'll have different perspectives on how to understand it as we get going. So let me start by saying, if you want to begin to understand environmental justice, you first have to understand racism. And I want to start by saying it's important to recognize that racism is more than just personal prejudice that one group of people has against another group of people. There's lots that has been written about how institutional and structural racism exists throughout America and all aspects of life. It's really widespread. And for white people, it's really difficult to see lots of times. It's just invisible to us. And it's partly because the structural institutional things that have happened, racism examples, are more covert. They're subtle sometimes. And if we want to begin to understand them and begin to address environmental racism, we have to make it more clear and bring it out into the open and talk about it openly and begin to address it. So the thing that I want to start with is I want to mention that Black and Indigenous people have slightly different views of what environmental justice is, and hopefully that will come out as we talk. There are similarities, and then there's some slightly differences in the way they approach this topic. The other thing I want to say is I want to give you a basic introduction to how environmental justice is defined broadly, maybe by the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. They basically say there's two most important things to know. The first one is environmental injustice connected to environmental racism is the unequal protection against pollution and contaminants that people face, where they live, where they work, where they worship, where they play. So that means that some people groups are more exposed to environmental harm and risk than other people groups are. And then some groups have greater benefits than other groups do. So predominantly white neighborhoods tend to have more benefits and they're more protected than people of color communities. So that's the first thing. And the second part of environmental justice that's important to know is it's not just being protected from harm and risks. It's also having a voice in the decision-making that affects your community. So often people of color have been cut off from opportunities to make decisions that will affect their community, their neighborhoods, their schools, policy decisions. That's what I'm getting at. Policy and laws, they are often overlooked. And that contributes to environmental injustice. It's very important that all of us who are affected by these issues can speak about what's happening in my neighborhood and in my area and in my purview. And if only some groups get to speak about it, then we don't have the chance to really address it at a foundational level the way we want. And so we have to ask ourselves questions like this. Whose suffering is acknowledged? And whose suffering is ignored? Whose preferences count? And who is missing from the conversation when we're having these kinds of conversations? And these are both grassroots kind of conversations and they're policy conversations that have to happen. So that's just some background, some basic introduction to environmental justice and environmental injustice. And we'll get into more detail about how it plays out here. But first, I'd like to have the panel introduce themselves. And I want to start on the left with Iris. She's a passionate person and cares about these issues. So why don't you tell us who you are and why you care?
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Sorry, I forgot to put a name tag on, but I'm Iris Gibson, and I'm here on behalf of the Community Collaboration on Climate Change. That is a mouthful, okay? So we call it C4, the Community Collaboration on Climate Change, C4. And I'm actually, my brief introduction is that I'm proud to be a community ambassador for the community collaboration on climate change. I was born and raised in this community, so I love serving the community I was born and raised in. And I'm honored to be here to share my education, resources, and my advocacy skills to influence policy and system change in the effort to achieve climate justice, utilizing my voice and representation of and for the BIPOC. And I say BIPOC because adding a D for the disabled people that also are a part of our community as well. And that's why I'm here tonight. So happy to be here. Nice to see everybody.
Thank you. Ned?
You got me. Hi, everyone. My name is Ned Andre, and I too grew up in this city, this neighborhood, played in this park, swam in the pool over there. It's no longer there. You young people don't even remember. But yeah, this is my community, which is, Grand Rapids, the southeast side, which I love and hate because it's been so good to me and so terrible all at the same time with these wonderful old houses that were built when all the lumber here was taken away from the Native Americans and then cut down and converted into this beautiful floor and the hardwood trim we always talk about and kind of idolize. Look at this beautiful. Well, that all came at an ecological price. So I've seen Grand Rapids when 28th Street on the other side of it was just nothing but fields. There are people that remember when the East Belt Line wasn't there and they called 28th Street the Belt Line because it was the big thoroughfare. And I don't care what side of the city you lived on, you came to the southeast side to shop and go to Woodland Mall and buy cars on 28th Street. Now we're in kind of a big city, and that's where C4 resides. I'm with the Community Collaboration on Climate Change, same as Iris. I'm the project coordinator. And when they were setting their project up, they were just looking for someone that has lived experience. And I have a lot of lived experience in Grand Rapids. And so I can tell you firsthand about environmental injustice. I like the way you brought that around because the vision is justice, but right now we're in a state of injustice. And C4, the Community Collaboration on Climate Change, is designed to try to help change that conversation.
Thank you, Ned. Now, Rob?
So Ahau Buju and Dinwe, Magadado County, Nisham Koya, Kondishnakas, Bodway, Wadami, Odawa, and Dow. Nodawa, ZB, Niyuk, and Devon Douglas, Muskegon, and Doch Bia, Mko, O, and Dodum. Ahau, you, Miigwech. Greetings. My name's Rob Larson. I'm an affiliate professor of natural resource management and geography and sustainable planning at GVSU or Grand Valley State University. I'm also an enrolled citizen with the Nottawassippi Huron Band of the Potawatomi. One of the great things about living in Michigan is you always have a map available. So even though I don't reside on my people's reservation, if you want to know where my people are from, if you know where Battle Creek is, the reservation's about 20 minutes south of there. But our people are spread across our ancestral homelands between Calhoun and southern Michigan up into Ottawa. And then there's a few of us that live in Muskegon. You might have heard me say that I live in Muskegon. I'm passionate about the environment. It's awesome, to talk to the folks here at Plaster Creek and that you all are here on your own time, it's super important. We need people to care. And I hope that as I'm able to share with you tonight with our other awesome panelists, that I'll give you some different perspectives to think about, because when I look at environmental justice, it's not just a human problem. There's other beings on the planet that are being pushed aside and disregarded just because they don't look, think, feel, act like human beings. So Miigwech for joining us tonight.
You guys probably don't have to record because they are recording for us.
Trying to get our.
Yeah, that's good. Now, let's begin with a really broad, open kind of question. And that is, in what ways have you seen or experienced environmental racism and environmental injustice in this community, in West Michigan, in Grand Rapids? Or West Michigan, to be broad.
I'll roll down my talking points, because
That's great, Iris, you can be first.
so the main thing, the main noticeable is the lack of education and resources to communities of color. During this work I do, just talking to residents in my area, family members, whoever, people that look like me, we don't have a clear understanding of what climate change even is, really, and how it affects us in different ways. So for me, that's the biggest noticeable thing, is like we don't have the education and resources to prepare people of color in neighborhoods that have disparities. The second thing for me is we got a lack of green spaces, but we got a ton of industrial buildings, concrete parking lots everywhere. And the highways that we have to suffer all the carbon emissions from. Everywhere you turn, all you see is cars, trucks, buses, everywhere. So those are like the most noticeable things that stand out for me.
Well, like I said, I'm a historian as well, trained historian, so I like the way you took it all the way back. We went to the My Healthy Climate Plan conference last year, and we sat with some tribal elders who were on the panel, and they told stories about how the worldview is so different. I think what we all have to kind of baseline is that we have these different worldviews out there, and you have the Judeo-Christian worldview, which in the book of Genesis, just as a historical book, talks about God giving man, well, this kind of special place and favor among all animals of living things, and then gives dominion over the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, the beasts of the land. And that word dominion, now you're a special creature and you go out and you dominate and you put things into straight rows and you cut stuff down and you're productive with the land and you clear it and you till it and you do all that stuff. Well, there's just too many people. We're doing too much of that. We're cutting down every tree and killing every living thing and changing, transforming all the ecosystems into monocrops where there used to be this vegetation of all kinds that grew. We come in and we got to have bananas in the mire over here. And I'm calling out names. It's any grocery store in America or in the world, And we have decimated the environment. So that overconsumption, the kind of the economic system of capitalism, economy isn't good unless it's growing. And you only grow an economy by providing consumption to the people and making it affordable for them to consume, and we consume like no other. And so that's kind of the baseline, is our economic system, the way it does everyone bad. But then when the systems that you talked about, those structures, redline minority people into certain neighborhoods and all that systemic stuff, it exacerbates it. And what you find is the BIPOC community is driven to the oldest housing stock in the city. So redline to the least valuable property, tightest density, all this stuff. And it's old and it's not insulated. It's not weatherized. The roof leaks and it's coated on the interior and the exterior with lead-based paint. And it's a lead bomb over time. Slow, constant ingestion of lead every day, every week, every month, every year. And then the injustice is environmental on all these levels, is that we knew we were cutting down too many trees, but it's so much money and they just keep doing it. And we know that we're consuming too much petrochemical oil. All this stuff is all these oil-based products. It's not just gasoline and all of that. It's just this incredible overconsumption of fossil fuels that's decimated the planet and the climate. And then, as Iris said, it hits the BIPOC community first, hits them worse, living in these old places, under insulated, energy burdens, low-lying land where the flood's coming, or even if the flood's not coming, the other part of the city's going to flood it. But if you release the levees just right, you can flood out those people. And you flip switches and you flood out those people when Hurricane Katrina hits, which is stronger because climate change is intensifying all this weather, and this is incredible intersection of all the injustices. And it always hits the BIPOC community first, and it hits them worst. And they're the least capable of responding. And, oh, you know, the house flooded out. There's people that say, well, you just file an insurance claim and you do this and you do that, you move over there and everything's all right. And it wipes some people, just wipes them off the map to all kinds of insolvency. So there's just right here, just all those things kind of in the neighborhood.
Where do you see it the most in Grand Rapids?
Environmental would be the, you know, the destruction of the land, all this blacktop that we've paved everything with, and the concrete, steel. And then the lead, really from an environmental, you follow lead all the way back, there's all this extraction and there's all this terrible injustice just in the mining and the that, all the way back to the present. You know, that if you don't have this room in this neighborhood painted properly, you're getting this constant shower of lead.
Let me add to that. So it's important to know, you may know this already, but it's important to know that all paint in the United States before 1978 had lead paint in it. So if you live in a house, even if you're not in a low-income community, any house, any building that was built before 1978 has lead paint in it. And if it's not remediated when you repaint it in the future, you're gonna suffer from lead poisoning, no matter where you live, anywhere in the country, not just here in Grand Rapids. But Grand Rapids is the city of Michigan that has the highest incident of lead poisoning, even more so than Flint. And Flint got all the attention because of the water problem with lead a few years ago. But even Grand Rapids, it's surprising to find out that there are 3 zip codes in Grand Rapids that have higher incidences of lead poisoning, particularly with children, than any other place in the state. So back to you.
Well, I'm gonna pass it.
Okay, Rob?
So, you know, when I look at this issue and you look at lower income based communities, which happen to mostly be people of color, I think it really starts with the political system. You know, our politicians drive a lot of things. And if you look at where attention's given, it's typically not in these areas that are suffering, you know, from lack of income, you know, food accessibility, industrialization, lack of green spaces. And it's because, you know, if we look at our political system, it's really because of lobbying, you know, drives a lot of things in our nation. You know, it isn't, we have representation that does what's right by all people, even though they're supposed to represent everybody. It's whoever's lining their pocket pushes their agenda. And so that's the start of it. And then in shifting from that, it really goes back to our education system. You know, I work in academia and very seldom, I mean, we're starting to see a change now where professors, researchers are starting to turn focus to more impoverished areas. But for the most part, our agency managers from the state, federal level, and these academic institutions have all picked these nice, pristine areas to choose to do research instead of, you know, digging in with a community that has these issues going. It kind of gets brushed to the side. And so I think those are 2 areas that really need to be addressed, is how can we readjust our political structure to ensure that everybody has equity and a level playing field, but also hopefully people are starting to open their eyes. You know, I look at our society as a whole, we're a very divided society. We have people on both ends of the spectrum and nobody can agree. And one of the things that I hope you get from me tonight is I'm going to talk a lot about connection, because I think that's where it starts. If we ever really want to see change with environmental justice or within our watersheds on an ecological aspect, on a humanity aspect, it really has to go back to this process of connection. And, you know, the unfortunate part is too, that, and I think we're starting to see some of this now too, is people that had the education and were acquiring the skills to identify some of these issues, a lot of times they happen to vacate the areas that they were living in. Not that there isn't a commitment level, but because a lot of times the resources and the funding was never there, you know, they choose to, you know, go do benefits where they can succeed and stuff. But I think hopefully we're starting to see the spectrum shift back the other way. So.
The next thing I'd really love to have you all talk about is, in what ways has your work, whether it's with particular organizations or just work life, in what ways has it begun to try to address these issues? What are some ways you're beginning to try to address the foundational issue that we're talking about?
So first and foremost, for me, it always starts with self. You know, having accountability and self-awareness. So when I started realizing and learning, you know, how important it was for me to know how to reduce my own carbon footprint before I could then venture out to sharing what my knowledge and my skills and experience with others. So for me, it started with me realizing like, hey, I'm doing too much consuming. I should be composting. I should be recycling. You know, I don't feel like it, but damn, I should put plastic over these windows because I need to weatherize my home. Just things like that. So, and then it got to this buildup where it was like, okay, I'm on this journey, making sure that I'm giving back to the earth as much as I possibly can. And so I wanted to just start helping other people know that their voice, especially for people who look like me, that our voices matter, especially when it comes to the decision making, especially what we don't know half of the time how to convey, like how we're really suffering because of climate change and then the injustices because of the system. Sometimes we don't know how. And me sharing my story and my experience with other people is just uplifting and empowering. So.
From a solutions. Yeah, from a solutions perspective, we've really been studying hard at the Community Collaboration for Climate Change, going across the country, taking trips. We've been to Detroit and to Chicago and to Cleveland and to Oakland, California, and to Washington, DC. And there's this ever-growing network of people that are coming together with all of the solutions. And many of them just go back to their communities or got the solution from their community. So the secret is, one, the community is the answer. Educate the community and let the community decide how to solve their problems. And that's one way that it has to be addressed, because when you have a lot of times the majority population helicoptering over groups that are downtrodden, that they actually downtrod, and then they want to sprinkle a little money from above and say, you know, we think we can fix that with this Parmesan cheese on the top, you know, and the problems that all the way root level deep, and you have to put the money in the grassroots, put the answer in the grassroots, and you let those people decide and solve their own problems. That's one part of it. But on a systemic level, the city of Grand Rapids can easily solve these problems that we have. There's an incredible abundance of wealth. The Kent County Health Department, Kent County itself, they got $700 million of ARPA money, and they participatory budgeted off a chunk of money. Everybody was cheering and excited, and they're still sitting on $700 million. And they control the health department, and half of the city is lead poisoned, and we need to release the floodgates and treat the people. But they basically say, oh, it's really bad for kids, which it is. It's the worst for kids. You do want to really deal with the kids, but the system is to the 70-year-olds. I got friends, older people who can't keep up with the house the way they once did. They're good people. They used to keep it up, but now they're on a fixed income, costs are up. They can't get on the ladder like they used to. All these different things happen. And now they do have the flaking paint in the house, and it's not their fault. We got to put all the philanthropic groups together, buy an entire block, move everybody out of that block, come through and fix the whole block up for everybody and move them back into their own house. And then go to the next block. You know, it's just that simple. And we have the resources, we could do it. Then there's billions of IRA dollars coming. And the answer is, people are still just spending the money in the system. It's going to the people who already had it, you know, and are already benefiting. It doesn't trickle down, bubble up is better.
So, you know, when you look at issues like this that need to change, whether it's environmental justice, or we see policy changes concerning the environment. The big thing that we need to keep in mind, because we're such a instant gratification society, you know, Burger King's motto was at one point, you want it your way right away. You know, and that's how we tend to view issues is we want an answer now. I'm going to demand an answer now. And not that that's a wrong mindset, but change comes slowly a lot of times when we're looking at environmental things, whether it's justice or changes in policy or climate action. Those changes happen slowly. I work a lot in forested systems. And so one of the things that I always tell my students is, you know, when you're looking at environmental stuff or you're trying to fix stuff, you have to be prepared to accept that things are operating in tree time. Now, I don't know if you know how much know anything about trees, but they operate on their own time scale. It's really slow, it's methodical, but in the end, if we want to catch a glimpse of like one of the most adapted species on the planet, it's trees. You know, they're able to adjust and react, and they've survived, you know, a lot longer than a lot of other species on the planet. And as we're looking at these things that we want to deal with, I love what Iris said. Really, change has to happen. We have to start right here. That's one of the biggest things that I teach my students. You can grab your pitchforks, torches, you can organize, you can riot, you can burn it all down. But in the end, that only enacts most of the time temporary change. There's a reaction from the powers that be to temporarily address it and appease the situation. But real change comes through relationship. And you'll hear me say that time and time again, whether we're talking about environmental justice or something else. The world operates, or used to operate. We don't realize this anymore. I want you to stop and picture a spider web. I'm sure everybody's seen a spider web here before. Think about a spider web. It's interconnected. It has all these strands, and every piece and purpose, including humans, all have their place in the world. But we tend to think of ourselves as the spider sitting on the web, that we're like opportunistic, that everything's here for our benefit. But if you break one strand, the whole web collapses. And a lot of times, because we miss that connection piece, the relational piece, we're never really able to bring in the true change or start to move in a direction that we want to change in. But it all comes back to here. We have to, you know, I love the fact that I love and hate that everybody has a cell phone in their hand nowadays. You know, they say we're more connected than we've ever been, but I don't think that's true. We're more disconnected. But one of the positives from this is that even folks in impoverished communities, not everybody, but a lot of them have access to cell phones on some level that have data plans. And so as you start becoming aware and you want to acquire knowledge, a lot of times we can get on there and Google and acquire knowledge. And that's where it really goes back to self. And so, you know, I encourage folks to like take a look inward. You know, can we get rid of plastic? Can we, you know, walk more or do this or that? And so that's how, if we want to turn the corner on environmental justice or anything, it all has to start here, and then it spreads to the people in our lives.
So you made me look around for my mom with that Burger King sign, because I was hurt. Look, this ain't Burger King. You can't have it your way. And I was like, no.
And then you earlier mentioned policy. The other part of the solution is policy. There has to be some policy, but what she said at the very beginning about the structure of racism, she's absolutely right. Whether it's climate justice or environmental justice, social justice, race is always intersectional with that stuff. And just, does anybody know the good news about Biden's executive orders in the last few years? What's the language? Because that's policy when he writes something. Anybody know the language of Justice 40? Like, what's the key sentence there? Anybody know it?
Tell us, Ned.
That 40% for every federal dollar, it's a whole of government executive order, any office under Biden's purview, 40% of the benefit of every dollar spent by the federal government, that benefit should go to the downtrodden communities, that LIDAC or whatever environmental screening tool you're using to label the neighborhood of focus, or it's a whatever, the zip code. So that sounds wonderful, doesn't it? That out of every dollar spent from the federal government, 40% of the benefit is required to go to those people. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? There's all kinds of layers to it. You're saying it's a bad thing. Why?
I was thinking it should be more,
Should be more.
because of more, it's been left behind
Yeah,
so long
So
that it
equity.
needs more money.
some equity. Yeah, but most people were excited about the 64, but you used the word money and I never did. The definition doesn't either. The definition says that 40% of the benefit should go to these people. So if $1 is spent, you can helicopter over one of these neighborhoods and sprinkle 40% of the dollars down in services that you just happen to have companies that can provide those services. And you have financial institutions that if you can't afford the siding or the windows or the insulation, don't worry about the roof. We got the, go to this bank, go to this product, and you can put it on credit at astronomical rates. That's really very, very favorable to the house, like gambling. And the environmental injustice, even as the solution, which is market-based, is implemented, it's only the benefit that's going to these folks, not the dollars. In fact, the dollars are being extracted. So
Going to companies.
going to companies owned by the majority population that can service.
Let's talk more, what would be a better way to do that policy?
We've been thinking hard about it in C4, and we've said, you keep the benefit, we'll take the dollars. The guy that comes across the table to shake your hand and says, hey, I tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna give you 40% of the benefit in this deal that's going down, the benefit. And it's gonna, we say, you know what? You take 100% of the benefit, and we'll just take 40% of the dollars. And then the same guy who was just peddling you this great deal will say, wait a minute now, what did you say? I don't want 100% of the benefit and 60% of the dollars. I want 100% of the dollars, and I want to give you 40% of the benefit. I'll keep 60% of the benefit as well, but I do want to give you that 40% of the benefit. And it's the language of the United States of America, the good deal. If you really just break it down the way a grammarian would in 8th grade when you dissect sentences and all that stuff, you'd say, wait a minute, this is a trick sentence. We got to get down from the table. We can't dance and sing because we're getting 40% of the benefit.
Yeah, but I could see how the word benefit in some sense might be better. I'm not arguing because I didn't even know about this policy, but, so you could say, we're giving you this money and we're putting in this great landfill sewage treatment plant, so we're spending a lot of money and this is gonna benefit you.
No,
But it doesn't, so if you look at it does, but, so I'm thinking something like what Plaster Creek Stewards does. It isn't always about the dollar, it's about where it benefits,
Yeah.
cleaner water or your lead programs. Is it, you could give the money there, but is it benefiting these people? So I can see
yeah.
some programs are about
If you
benefit.
give the money and you say, there's a solution, we can have market-based, go in and clean these houses up. And 40% of the companies that do it, we want them to be BIPOC companies.
I was
They
gonna say.
get resourced by the federal government. So
Yes.
you're giving them the dollar to solve their own problems. But as the situation stands, you don't get any of the dollars and they fix stuff up for you as they rotate you through.
So what you're saying is that people of color are not involved in the decision-making that affect their community.
Yeah, nor the solution. Their,
Right.
their
you're not getting those
opinion, their
financial-
experience, come sit at a table with us, talk to us, give us your story. Tell us about your trauma. That would make for a good video. The reason we need to do something about lead and that our companies need to benefit is we can make a video about the trauma that you and your children have suffered. We can put it out there and raise money.
Let's circle back and talk about something you said, Rob, about relationships. We need to build and deepen relationships. That's true in terms of people's relationships to the land and the air and the water, but it's also true between people groups or neighbors and communities. Let's talk more. How do we deepen the chance to build relationships across all these divisions that exist in the culture? What do you-
Yeah. Oh, can we get Kareem up there too?
Oh, yeah.
He's right.
Hi, Kareem.
Hey, I made it.
Glad to see you.
It's a good time to break the.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me.
You wanna be in the middle, is that
Step
the-
it up.
Thank you for saying that. Kareem, take a second and just tell everybody who you are.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kareem Scales. I am a community advocate. I'm here with some of my C4 constituents. I am one of the board co-chairs of C4. a community organizer, having worked with the Grand Rapids NAACP for a number of years, serving as the executive director. I now own my own consultancy firm, Skills Consulting, as well as work with the Michigan Environmental Justice Coalition as the development manager. So glad to be here with you.
Yeah, sorry, you might need to ask your question.
Okay, so let's circle back and think about how do we deepen and build relationships of trust and mutuality and reciprocity so that we can address some of these issues?
So one beautiful thing that we have experienced within C4 is we had a wonderful lady by the name of Susan Clark, and she came and delivered what she a program that she developed on her own. It's trauma-informed philanthropy. And so that's one key thing is building trust, is being informed about people's trauma. The history of how, you know, communities of color have experienced this trauma due to the system throughout. So that's one tool that we use to build relationships and kind of get that trust going in the community, as just being trauma informed in our work.
If I could add to that, I would say, I would agree with everything Iris said. I think to add a little bit more, it starts with acknowledgement, right? So I think that's where you're going with making sure that people are informed of others' trauma. Once we acknowledge the trauma that's been done, then I think it starts at home. I think some of them, you all said it before I came, it's not just about what we do in our places of work or what we do in our places of recreation, but what are the conversations happening at the dinner table, right? Amongst family and friends. And so I think that's where it starts is trusting yourself to go through that growth process. And then from there, just being conscious of that historical trauma as we go through the growth process. And they can speak to our work at C4. It's although we've had some successes, it's been extremely challenging as well. When you talk about the wrongs that we're trying to rewrite. And so understanding that this work is tough, it's hard, it doesn't just change overnight, but being comfortable, being uncomfortable, I think is the best way to phrase it. And trust in the process.
So I'm gonna throw something, well, I got a couple thoughts. So I'm gonna address the trauma thing first. One thing that a lot of people don't realize when there's trauma inflicted on a group of people, that trauma ends up becoming lateral trauma and violence within these groups of people. If I look at Indian country, you know, and that's what I'm gonna speak to. We had 200 years of negative federal Indian policy to try and erase us as a people. And the thing that we're seeing now is instead of working together to try and get ourselves healed and moving forward from this trauma, that a lot of times, a lot of tribes are in turmoil and they're perpetuating lateral violence on other people. They're saying, hey, you don't belong here. You don't look like us. You don't talk like us. You didn't grow up here. You don't belong here. And so, you know, this trauma is further perpetuating and dividing and conquering these groups of people that we know that there's strength in numbers, that if we would stand together, you know, come together with a common vision, unity, not that, and when I say that, not everybody has to agree 100% on everything, but we have a common direction that we're moving forward to. And so I think it was awesome that the trauma aspect got brought up. The second thing is, when I look at environmental racism, it's really about this disconnection that groups of people have with each other. It's about one group wants to take power and hold another group down and not try to understand where the other group's coming from, understand their background, their life stories. And so really, one of the things that I teach about in my class is looking at the environment, I think fits really well with this. We've come to a place in our society, not just environmentally, but on a societal level, where we have, I'm going to call it 3 Ds. So the first D is we're disconnected. You know, we're not connected with the people around us. And I'm not talking just because of your cell phone, but I remember like my grandparents growing up, they knew their neighbors, you know, and there was relationships, there was community. Now we can barely even talk to the person across the street. And so when we take it in a microcosm of like a unified neighborhood, and then we zoom that out, like, you know, there's not gonna be any cohesiveness. And so the first thing is, like I said, we're disconnected. And because of that disconnection, it leads to intentional and unintentional disrespect. And so we automatically, because we don't understand the people around us, or we don't understand the connection with the land that we should have, we do things most of the time. I think most people are pretty good-hearted, you know, and they wouldn't do things to offend. I can remember I had a student in one of my classes when he found out I was Native. He's like, "Hey, how much blood quantum are you?" And I was like, I told him I used it as a teaching moment. I know some people in my community would have shredded him right on the spot. You know, because that's not a question you ask Native people, because that's one of the tools that the federal government's used to erase us. And
Currently, yeah.
it is.
I'm indigenous as well.
And so when we look at that, you know, that was unintentional disrespect. And, you know, and of course we have people that they perpetuate intentional disrespect, but disconnection leads to disrespect, which has brought us to the place where we're at now. We're in this perpetual destruction, or we're deteriorating as a society, environmentally, socially, culturally. Like, we're not who the creator intended us to be, whether you call him God, Allah, or Gitche Manitou like I do. We're not at the core of genuine human beings like we were intended to be. And so it really, I'm going to circle back again now to connection again. So we move from the place where we want to be isn't at the 3Ds, but we want to shift to these 3Rs that I call them. And the first one's reconnecting. The thing that I find about reconnecting, when I drop my barriers and the person I'm trying to connect with, whoever that would be, drops their barriers, there's an opportunity that I don't have to agree with everything that they do. I don't have to understand every aspect about their life. I don't have to, you know, I don't have to always engage on such an intimate level and agree with everything. But because I start building a connection, it shifts the dynamic to where it brings us to a place of intentional and unintentional respect. And so it allows me to be able to sit across the table from somebody that might have opposing political beliefs. And I stop and say, "Hey, I'm just curious why you believe what you believe, because that's not really what I jive with. It seems kind of extreme." You know, we don't take these opportunities. Does anybody know who Walt Whitman is? Like, one of my favorite quotes is, "Be curious, not judgmental." But we're at a place where we don't care what somebody else says. We immediately judge them. But going back to this process, we reconnect, we get that respect, which brings us to a place of restoration. And that's that connection that I keep alluding to.
The thing I'd add is exactly where he ended, the word restitution. You know, we've all been traumatized, and white folks have been traumatized too. You live in the same poisonous, toxic environment, that it's just a different flavor a little further out. It's where they put down all the fake wood and the plywood, and there's all this volatile organic compound off-gassing into your bedroom every night. You don't know it. So your ailments are going to be different, but you know, fertility rates are down across the board in all these industrialized countries. We're all living in a toxic environment. But to the relationship piece, the restoration. Once we use that trauma lens and say, every one of us is traumatized, some people a lot worse than others, and you do want to apply equity and you want to restore those who are at a disadvantage, but we all need to do restorative practice together. So when I step on your toe, instead of judgment and blame, we say, "What happened?" "Well, we were moving around kind of fast and I stepped on your toe." And I acknowledge it. And then, "What was your part in it?" "Well, I wasn't looking where I was going either." And then you work through all the social friction that we have. We demonize it. We say it's just a natural part of human interaction. We're going to have some tension. We can't walk away from each other just when things are uncomfortable. You got to sit and have these mature conversations and restore relationship. And you got to let me be who I am and not try to put me into your box. I've never lived in all my years just free from the expectation that the greater society has and all this pressure to conform and assimilate and behave properly or else. And I think, like you were mentioning, all living creatures, go back to those two worldviews, where the indigenous worldview, all living things, all things have worth, values, essence, spirit, part of nature. we should be doing that too, not just amongst each other, but restoration. We got to change these paradigms, you know. When we learned that the pawpaw tree gives off a fruit that is pollinated by flies. What? That's gross. We have negative thought about flies or roaches or spiders or whatever it is. We're gonna get out our pesticides and we're gonna kill every last one of them. No, flies are beautiful creatures that play a part in nature and they pollinate and they're part of the ecosystem and we have to respect them because then the pawpaw tree can deliver this delicious fruit that we got to get all that restoration back.
Let me close by adding something. So, anybody else want to say anything before I say a final word?
Yeah, can I throw, or do you got something you want to throw in?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All right, so I love one of the things that Ned said is, you know, in my greeting, I don't know if you caught this, I used the word ani. Ani means I recognize the light within you. And the thing is, you know, if you look back to what colonization did here in this country, it was all about really, in essence, breaking the connection that indigenous people had with the land and with the other beings. And the thing is, we need to change the lens that, you know, that was mentioned too, change the lens that we view the world with and realize that, you know, just because somebody doesn't look like us, doesn't mean that they don't have ani. And just because the trees don't look, think, talk, feel like us, they still have ani. The water has ani. And the thing is, if we start looking at the world through that lens, that all beings have ani in them, like what a world that we could live in.
You know, I would add one other last comment before you close. And so just reflecting on some of the comments, Ned, you just made around restoring relationships. And so I like to think of it or look at it a little bit different, because when oftentimes people say the system is broken, I'm sure we've all heard that phrase before, the system is broken. In order for something to be broken, that would imply that at one point it was once whole. And so I think we need to really re-envision what we're doing. It's not about restoring relationships. What we're doing now and what we do at C4 is breaking down those extractive systems and rebuilding them with something totally new that serves the community as a whole. So I just wanted to add that last.
Thank you. I'm not sure if, Dave, have you introduced the idea of reconciliation ecology? He's going to. But you,
Well, we talked about it the first week.
okay. I want to bring back and sort of summarize or like close with saying the idea of reconciliation ecology. It's a science that its first comment is that we need to heal the relationship people have with the land and the earth. And Dave and I have just finished a book that's coming out in a couple weeks. And the point of the book is that we are arguing that we have to go farther than just helping people heal their relationship with the earth. In order to do that, we have to heal our relationship with people, across people. And the only way to do it is to first recognize that there's a problem. And second, to acknowledge that I am complicit in this problem. I have contributed to it, all of us. Every one of us have contributed something to this problem. And we have to acknowledge and admit it and lament. We have, no one said that tonight, but that there's really something that's important. We have to lament the contributions we've made that have caused the problems that exist. And only when we recognize the problem and acknowledge our role in it, our complicity, and lament it, then we are poised to begin to do reparations and repair and bring some trust and healing and reciprocity to work on problems together. But if we're going to deny that the problem exists or try to find someone else to point the finger at who caused the problem, it's going to be much harder to bring the kind of healing and reconciliation that needs to happen. So Dave will talk more about reconciliation ecology and he'll give a plug for our book, but I just wanted to mention it. So can we take a break and then? Okay, yeah, do you have time for questions? Would you like to ask the panelists any questions? Yeah, go right ahead.
What, I had a couple, one was, no, Doreen.
Yes.
And look back your name, I'm sorry. You mentioned that the work that C4 has been doing has really been challenging. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, you know, I'm a white person. Am I standing in your way? Or, I mean,
No,
you know,
no,
like,
no.
what is it that's so challenging?
So I'll just go back kind of to the beginning of C4. I'm not sure how much you all share, but C4 was a collective that was established originally by the Office of Sustainability at the city of Grand Rapids. And so the whole goal originally was to bring together this various mix of community-based organizations with municipality to develop a body that would address environmental issues on behalf of the city. So as you all could imagine, by bringing together all these different organizations, I mean, NAACP, Sierra Club, WMIAC, Urban Core Collective, just a gumbo mix of organizations with different priorities. 23 to be exact.
That's gumbo.
It was challenging, right? Just for us to all get on one accord about what it is we're trying to do. I mean, even, and then one thing that we continue to experience at every step of the process, as we talk about breaking down extractive systems, we're all accustomed to the systems that we're a part of. And so at every step, when things get challenging, the first thing that people want to do is result right back to the systems that got us right here.
We just knocked down.
And so revisiting that, staying true, standing in those moments of uncomfort, really centering what it is we're seeking out to do. I mean, even early on at C4, when we first secured our first grant, the funder was really adamant on the funds have to go through the city. And we're like, we want to do this differently. We don't want to have to continue to be strongholded to finances from, coming from the city. And we put, and there were several members who had different feelings about that. But ultimately, what we were successful in doing after some tough conversations, we were successful in allowing for two BIPOC entities who had never had the opportunity to fiduciate a grant of this magnitude to serve as our fiscal sponsors. And so now, since then, both Michigan Black Expo and Hispanic Center of West Michigan have been our fiscal sponsors. And not only did they receive an administrative fee, but now they can now go after other grants, and now they have the capacity and the experience. And so at every step of the process, I mean, at all of our events, we're like, our launch event, we had 5 different BIPOC caterers, we had childcare, we had, just going through that level of intentionality at every step of the process is challenging, but it pays off in the long run. I guess that's what I would say.
Plaster Creek Stewards, they were vendors at that, and they've done a lot of work on our projects. They're incredible.
So you're using that terminology. I'm gonna show my age here. I don't know what those letters, well, I can't tell what letters you're saying. By,
Black, yeah.
Black, indigenous, people of color.
Asians, Latinos,
okay, yeah, gotcha.
And for me, I use by walk because I'm a Black Indigenous woman of color.
There you go.
And she also uses D at the end to make sure disabled people are.
and we have youth, and we have the elderly, and we have the
So
unhoused.
you got a lot of,
Collaboration as well.
okay, but you're saying that, I'm like, in Hispanic, I'm like, that's not in there, but that's color, so. So could I ask you a question, because I wanted, you mentioned that somebody asked you a specific question and that it was very inappropriate. And I didn't understand that. So, because I didn't understand what they asked, and so therefore I didn't understand the conversation. I'm sorry.
All right, so I'll kind of try and expound on this. One of the biggest issues that Native Americans face in our country is we went from teaching about the first Thanksgiving in our, especially elementary schools, Pilgrims and Indians, the whole thing. Now with the dynamics in our country, it's now considered a bad thing to teach. And so now out of the K through 12 schools, there's like nothing. Like they focus on Thanksgiving and gratitude for the month, but like I know especially where I'm up, and a lot of schools have like chosen to like, we're not experts in this. We don't want to go down this road and start any issues. And so now, because of things like that, and I'm not saying the latter was any better, but a lot of people too only know Indian history or Native American history based on what was taught through our K through 12 schools, which is controlled by the nation who forced us into the state that they're in. And so they're going to tell their own narrative. Yeah. And so the first thing, because too, Hollywood's painted us out to be buckskin wearing, war paint, bareback riding headdresses and stuff. people can't connect with Native people anymore. And so the first thing that I typically get asked, because light skin, brown hair, blue eyed, is they're like, how much blood do you got? And so no other group, I mean, there might be other groups, but typically no other group in our country gets asked like, hey, how much blood do you got? You know, and I think a lot of it, I have a little bit of different standpoint. I didn't grow up on the reservation. I've reconnected to my culture, my heritage, my people later on in life. I didn't get tribal. I grew up knowing I was indigenous. I got land settlements when I turned 18 from the federal government, land settlement money, but I didn't have tribal membership until like 2003, where I was able to, my tribe didn't even get federally recognized until until, oh, this is bad that I don't know right.
Okay.
But it's been a long day. But anyways,
Okay, so now I understand what that question
And
was.
can I expound on that a little bit too, because we are a BIPOC group and we've learned from our indigenous representatives who are not here tonight, but this concept of blood quantum. So when we think about the genocide perpetrated against the Native American people, we talk about it like it's historical, like what we did back then. It is happening right now today through blood quantum. This is what they taught us. So like black folks, we did a 1-drop rule. If you even look like you got a little curl in your hair.
That's what you were all going, yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah.
black. You're black.
I'm living that right
Yeah,
now.
well, like quantum works this way. If you're at 80% and you calculate with someone that's at 60%, now they do a mathematical computation and say, now this child has less blood quantum than either of them. And if you step outside of the bloodline, then that's a huge drop. And so slowly over time, like the Grand River Band, I think they're down to like 100 people, 115 people. So either you're gonna get married to your cousin or your sister or brother or whatever, or somebody that's too distant or too closely related to you, or you're gonna go outside and then your people will disappear over time.
Thank you, that helps.
So the whole issue of blood quantum is a tool that is used to keep
right.
Native Americans.
Active
Okay.
genocide.
Right.
It's happening right
Either
now.
like on the
Every
reservation.
time someone
with
has a
the-
baby.
Yeah, okay.
And I want to throw one more thought in there too, that I was really trying to get at. The problem with people that, you know, my people is because Hollywood's painted us out to be a certain way. We have the first Thanksgiving narrative that a lot of folks my age or older, and maybe even a little younger know about, is now, you know, and it kind of speaks to what you just said, that if, you know, if you got a curl in your hair, people are like, oh,
Yeah.
you're a person of color.
Yeah.
Like right away, I can remember some of the jobs I've worked, like I shouldn't have had to do this, but like I had to pull out my tribal ID and card smack people and then put them in their place, which, you know, is sad that we live in a society that forces me to do that. Or people would say, you know, like I can remember one of the places I worked at, this was a couple of years ago, but they would call me Big Toe, saying that I had just enough Native in me to fill my big toe. And the thing is, because the dynamics have shifted with Native populations, we can't connect to Native people like we can other groups of people, you know, by visually identifying with them. And, you know, and then we still have the mascot deals going on, you know, and so it's really a tricky situation. I know for me, and this goes back to, if we want to make change, it has to start here. My own people, you know, perpetuate lateral violence against me and other people that look like me, that we don't look Native enough, or because I don't live on the reservation, I'm a casino Indian, which isn't true. I probably know more culture than some of the people that live on my reservation. And so the thing is, I have two choices. I can either continue to perpetuate the problem, and I could have verbally smacked up that kid, or I could stop and say, I'm gonna make the change here. I know who I am. Now I need to work on relationship building. And if I look at our society's shifting to where now we want to drop everybody in categories. And I'm not saying that there isn't some value to categories, but at the end of the day, we're genuine human beings. And if we don't ever learn to get back to that point, we're never gonna move forward. So.
I stopped checking off that box about 5 years ago. It says, are you Hispanic or
Right.
what? The only time I'll do it is the pandemic stuff, you know, but because whatever, but I just know like. They aren't like pure white and pure this and, yeah.
Right.
We can take one more question, then we're gonna have a break. Anybody have one? Yes.
Yeah, nice to see y'all. But my question is sort of like, what is the trajectory that you see, like, as C4 is sort of like changing and has had a couple years on the ground, what, like 2 years now? Or maybe even more like with the making including as well, but sort of like what is the trajectory that you see and how do you continue to see sort of like community members being enabled in different ways to really be part of that work that's happening? I know there's been like a lot of work with like LIDAC communities and with I think it was like GVMC, and also the same with like your work, and sort of like as a professor and opportunities you see, especially for like young folks, and continue to be part of like that environmental justice like change.
Start. So essentially what I'm hearing from you, Bethsaida, is kind of what's next. What's the next chapter look like? And I'm not sure if you all aren't aware, Bethsaida is also one of our C4 ambassadors as well. And so speaking of ambassadors, I think that's really where where the heart of our work lies, is really with our ambassadors. So not sure how much you all shared about our ambassador program.
Not much.
But at the core of it, really, what we do is we source community members who are directly in disproportionately impacted communities and allow them to make their own decisions, sit at the tables and influence the decisions that we're a part of. And so one of the ways that we've done that is through our ambassador program and our mini grant program. And so each ambassador has the opportunity to apply for a $5,000 mini grant, where they can literally launch their own climate justice projects. And so we're looking to be able to continue to expound on that. I think it's definitely one of our focuses. I think political advocacy is definitely an area that we want to continue to grow in. I've had the pleasure of participating in a process through the Federal Energy Regulation Commission, FERC, called FERC rulemaking. And so through the rulemaking process, it determines what are the energy transmission rates. And so exploring opportunities like that with C4, spending a little bit more time in Lansing, educating our elected officials on what's happening on the ground. And so political advocacy, I think, continuing to build off our ambassador program. In addition to that, we've had the pleasure of entering 2 other pretty extensive programs, one being our C4Ever rideshare program. And so you all be hearing more about that soon. C4, in partnership with the Green Lining Institute, will be launching an electric vehicle rideshare program right here in the 3rd Ward. So we're going through the planning phases of that now, but super excited to be partnering with Green Lining on that initiative. And then in addition to that, our partnership with Friends of Grand Rapids Parks, which Garfield will be a direct recipient of. We'll be planting, is it upwards of 15,000 trees throughout the urban core, predominantly across the city, across the region, really. And so really excited to continue to build on that partnership as well. So we got a lot of work to do. We're officially becoming a 501c3. So congrats there. We went through our pilot phase and bringing on staff, and we're growing up. And so the work actually just now begins.
Yeah, the thing I'd add to that is, as we become a 501c3, the Community Collaboration on Climate Change is self-identifying as a CDC, a Community Development Corporation. So our focus will just expand, where we can do lots of programs instead of, like, we already have 3 programs running. Basically, we're just going to keep adding programs where we can, attract grant dollars, different things, and we want to rebuild the community. A big push that for us right now is taking the billions of IRA dollars that are flowing, not the benefit, we want the dollars, and we want to move those dollars into programs that will move 10 people out of a house on a block, take a whole block out, come in there, plant trees, pull out all the lead paint, remediate the soil, and then move those people back in, and then just keep moving that 10 block, 10 vacant houses. Just keep moving it all over the city, or whatever, 100, do 100 at a time, whatever we got to do to really make radical difference. Because I've been hearing about all the environmental justice for 40 years. When I was 14, 15, we had classes together where the science teachers start talking about all the bees are dying and they're not quite sure why all the bees are dying and the frogs are dying, this, that, and the other. So we can fix all that. Community Development Corporation.
One thing that's gonna be lovely for me to see as an ambassador as we continue this growth is our ambassador program actually becoming a model where other states and cities can adapt the program as well. And also the fact that we're BIPOC focused, like that's very important. Like that's the special thing about C4. We're the first of our kind BIPOC. And so that's what I'm excited to see as we continue.
Communities are there too.
Yes.
Don't think that we don't have any of the historical players, but we do too. Sure.
I guess from like my aspect, it's getting boots on the ground. You know, it's easy for people like in the university setting to stay in their confined little bubble. You know, but I can promise you, like, I'm not just in here talking about, you know, that we got to build relationships. That's, you know, I'm out actually on the ground building relationships. I spend a lot of time in K through 12 schools. Sometimes it's a challenge because like, I'm like, I don't have any more time, you know, but I hope that as I change and I build a relationship with other faculties that they'll pick up doing the same things. But it's really too, you know, I'm sure some of my colleagues might scoff at me that I'm sitting here with Keldon faculty, you know, because we're supposed to be in competition. You know, but I don't operate that way.
Nobody.
They already know anyways, but I mean, I don't operate that way. I mean, I think that it's going to take us all together to make a change, and we need diversity in perspectives. We need diversity in action. We need people, you know, like C4 group here can reach people that I can't reach, you know, and I can reach people that they can't reach. And, you know, the Keldon folks, vice versa, and including you, you know, and it really too, one of the things that I want to emphasize to you is like, stop and see if there's opportunities to change your worldview. Has anybody in here read Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer? So here's one of the biggest things that I want to touch on with that. So, because I use it to teach on, I had the privilege of having lunch with Robin here when she came to Grand Valley. It was a super awesome experience. But one of the things that I've seen as I've tried to integrate this line of thinking in my classes is people put up their barriers. You know, as soon as we say, you know, hey, I'm this group or something's attached to this group, like we automatically put up our barriers. Like, hey, I can recall that. So I'll give you an example. There's a chapter in there called Learning the Grammar of Animacy, and it references a lot of native language, native perspectives and stuff like that. But I can tell you from sitting down with Robin, we have our ceremonies and cultures and customs that are, you know, only intended for Native people, but like the knowledge in that book is intended for everybody to return back to being a genuine human being and realize that it isn't I that matters, it's the we that matters, and it's the grass and the water and the fish and the birds and the fact, and they're not just objects, but they have ani.
Yes.
And so the thing that I would encourage you is, and it's the thing that I'm modeling, is to continue to build relationships. You've already taken the first step because you're here on your own accord. And so foster these relationships, connections and stuff. I'm hoping that before we leave here, I can get some contact information, because here's another avenue to like put this in practice, because I'm going to bring this back around, because you're talking about watershed management. A lot of times in Western science, we get so focused on one thing. So here's what I want you to do. This is going to sound silly, and I hope we're okay on time. But I want you to close one eye, put your hand up like this. Come on. I know it seems silly, but do it. This is how Western science looks at a lot of things. What can you see when you're looking like that?
Just in front of me.
You can only see what's in front of you. And a lot of times, the way we approach things in science as in a society, we get so focused on something. Now, when you take the hand down and up of both eyes, I can see the peripheral. I can see in front, I can see above, I can see below. And that's if we want to overturn environmental justice, we want to restore watershed health, we want to heal Gokniskeenan or our grandmother Earth, we have to step back and look that everything's connected and that we can't make a decision here rashly because there's a trade-off that could chain react another negative effect here. And I'm not saying that it's gonna be a perfect system, but I guarantee you, if we will just step back and take the two-eyed approach, and that's what it's called, I can send some resources to the Plaster Watershed Stewards team to give you some more information, and it's called two-eyed seeing. It's looking through the indigenous, it's like having a pair of glasses. I look through one lens with traditional ecological knowledge, the knowledge my ancestors had, where because we were so connected to everything, because our life depended upon it. It was a pharmacy, grocery store, lumber yard. And then through the other lens, we could look at it through Western society or political aspects and stuff and try and solve those problems. But when we have this holistic approach, we will hopefully end up with a better end goal.
So
Sorry if
we
that's long.
do I see.
Yes.
There you go.
That's right. Let's thank the panel for being here.
This is spoken by a wonderful woman. I don't know her official title, but I do know that she is an environmental justice warrior. And she said, in order to change anything, we need everyone. And her name is Carla Walker Miller.
Yes.
To change anything, we need everyone, period.
Thank you.
Okay. Break. Yeah, let's take 5 minutes and regroup. See what you gotta do.
Or-
And circle back.
Wait there. Got that. That was a choice.
Thank you.
And then maybe, or what if the drop down do?
Association. This is Garfield Park Neighborhood Association. There's 31 neighborhoods. So